Hey, have you ever wanted to create a fan theory about a piece of media that you love, but you're not creative and don't want to do any research? I present to you this. What if everything that happened in your story was just a dream? Maybe one of the characters imagined it, or they were in a coma, or they were dead, or in purgatory, or something else the whole time. Wouldn't that be crazy? You get the premise now. Hey, it's explicitly unusual. So yeah, I'm not fond of these types of fan theories personally, despite my most popular video being talking about one of them. They are just usually very lazy. It's a theory you can make about quite literally any property, and any holes in the theory can be explained away with, well, you don't know how the logic of this thing works, so it could happen. However, they're not all bad. Some theories actually provide evidence that works in context. But they all kind of just get lumped together, and I think that's unfair personally. So I've decided to make a video on as many popular dream theories, coma theories, everyone was in hell theories, all of those, just in one video. Just any sort of theory that suggests that the entire story is from one character's imagined perspective, or everything is not what it seems. Yeah, there's a lot of ways I could phrase this, but dream theory is the most popular one. I want this to be a semi-definitive take on a couple of these at least. Every day some crappy top 10 video or Instagram post regurgitates these without any actual consideration as to whether or not they make sense, and this just leads to people making more bad fan theories as such. So I'd like to reclaim my position as theory guy after not making a theory video for like 5 years. With this.
That ain't ironic, bitch. I love Rugrats.
Rugrats was a great Nicktoon turned poster child for millennial nostalgia. I grew up watching it on reruns, and occasionally the nostalgia gets to me as well. It focuses on a group of babies who have casual adventures, all while being terrorized by demon toddler Angelica. So this theory presents that Angelica was the only one of the Rugrats who was actually real, and the rest of them only existed in her imagination. The backstory the theory provides is that all the babies died young or either weren't born, and Angelica is imagining them all. They're her imaginary friends, or maybe she's schizophrenic. We haven't gone to that. So, what happened to them all exactly? Chucky died with his mother, explaining his father's nervous and frantic nature. Tommy was a stillborn, which is why his dad is always in the basement, making toys for the son he never had. The DeVilles had an abortion, never knowing the sex of the baby. Angelica imagined them as twins. Going a step further, with the teenage continuation series All Grown Up, it suggests that Angelica is taking hallucinogens to reimagine her childhood imaginary friends, now grown up with her. It's something. As for the babies born later, it suggests that Dill was the only real one, but Angela could never differentiate him from the rest of her hallucinations. Also, he suffered intense brain damage as a baby. In the movie, when Chucky's dad marries this woman Kira, her daughter Kimmy joins the main cast. The theory's version is that Kira had a daughter who was taken away from her because she had an intense cocaine addiction. So Angelica is just imagining Kimmy based on the stories of that. Her friend Susie was real and played into Angelica's delusions to be nice, and when All Grown Up ended, Angelica actually died from a drug overdose. Okay, so, where to begin? It was interesting at first with the main 4 babies, but then they really had to stretch it there. Okay, all the babies' cause of death or what made them not present are so-so. It's an interesting, edgy thought experiment, but it can't really be disproven because of that, because there's not really any evidence that suggests any of these things could have happened. Like, the stepmom had a cocaine addiction? Sure, why not? The show obviously never mentioned anything like that, but that means you can't disprove it really either. But actually, here's one hole in it I did find. How exactly did Chucky die with his mom? Because in canon, Chucky's mom died from cancer, so the actual base theory, apart from all the grown-up drug addiction hallucination stuff, is fairly interesting at best, but still has holes in it that can be disproven. Most of these theories are really hard to disprove because of the imaginary, altered reality nature of them. You can't really supply much evidence that proves them to not happen. Everything can be chalked up to, it was a dream, it doesn't have to make sense. But this one already has a pretty clear hole in it. So yeah, interesting thoughts, except for all the edgy teen stuff, which it kind of drowned itself in later to become a creepypasta. I'm gonna give it 3 Reptars out of 10. I'm not gonna do the whole pro Jared bit the whole time. I just, Reptar gets clicks. Have you seen all the t-shirts of him? I can't wait for all the Friends was never actually funny, just take out the laugh track comments. Like, just let people enjoy stuff, okay? I enjoy watching Friends. My favorite character was always Phoebe. She's actually not, but I just needed like a clever transition, so we're just gonna go with it. The theory's about Phoebe, okay? So Phoebe is always presented as something of an outsider to the group. They all have prior connections that lead to them being friends. Monica and Rachel went to high school together and are roommates. Chandler and Joey are roommates. Ross is Monica's brother and went to college with Chandler. Phoebe used to be Monica's roommate before the series, but now she lives off far away with some ghost roommate that gets mentioned as a running joke. That combined with her eccentric nature and unusually dark backstory makes it so that she doesn't fit as nicely into the puzzle that is this friend group. The backstory that Phoebe is given in the show is comically dark, which is kind of a part of the running joke. The backstory is that Phoebe's father ran off when she was a kid, her mother killed herself, her stepfather went to prison, her twin sister is estranged from her. She grew up as a homeless mugger on the street and had regular run-ins with the police, and she finds out her mother wasn't her real mother and her biological mother is still alive. But she's quirky, so we don't have to worry about how intense that all is. This theory imagines, what if Phoebe was actually an outsider and was always watching the friend group from outside the coffee shop windows, imagining what it was like to be on the inside? The theory writes out a potential finale for the show, where we see inside the coffee house, all the friends have different names and personalities, and they briefly mention the weird girl who always watches them through the window. She leaves, passes by a window for a store called Ursula, and she sits down on a couch in the middle of Central Park with 6 colorful umbrellas. Okay, so interesting. Very, very poorly written, but interesting. Did her sister not exist? What a random thing to throw in there. The concept of the friends all being completely different people with identities assigned to them by a stranger is really interesting, but like, the ending feels really corny and needlessly thrown together. Like, we get it, it's the theme song. You might as well have said she claps 4 times to turn the lights off. So one of the creators of Friends, Marta Kaufman, actually addressed this theory and didn't like it, calling it disgusting. Now, does this disprove the theory? Not really. It's pretty obvious that's not what the creators intended when they were writing the show. It's somebody's personal interpretation. If the show supplied definitive evidence that this wasn't the case, then that would be disproven, but one of the creators not liking it doesn't actually disprove this theory. Now, the fact that the theory sucks does make it pretty invalid. It leaves a lot up in the air. What about subplots that Phoebe wasn't present for? Did she imagine entire portions of the show she would have no presence or knowledge of? The characters slowly finding out about Monica and Chandler's relationship comes to mind. What about any time the characters traveled to a new location? Did she have to come up with an entirely new set of characters and surroundings for herself? The human brain can't make up new minds. Was every single character we saw on the show somebody that she saw the face of and then assigned a new personality and role in the world to? Friends ran for 10 years, that's a lot of stuff for her to imagine. And yet the dream aspect doesn't really account for any of this. Like, you can't just say, like, a character is crazy and they're an unreliable narrator and have it fill in all the blanks here. There's a lot of blanks that need to be filled in.
I'm a pretty cool dude, and that's just the facts.
Alright, what do I know about Saved by the Bell? This show is way before my time, but I watched every episode on Netflix, so I'm very fascinated by it. This teen sitcom ran from 1989 to 1993. It had references I barely understood, outdated writing, cheesy acting, and I had a fun time with it. I wouldn't rewatch, but at least now I know all the 90s kid references. So this is Good Morning Miss Bliss. The show starred Hayley Mills, the original actress behind The Twins and The Parent Trap. It ran on the Disney Channel for 13 episodes, got cancelled, and then was picked up and completely reworked to air on NBC, removing the lead actress and focusing on the young teen actors, while keeping a few original cast members, like the principal, just not the lead actress. The Miss Bliss episodes would later re-air, remarketed as the junior high years, which does make them canon. Except what? So here's where the theory comes in. This is Zach Morris. He's the titular 90s cool guy douchebag, right? He's a radical guy with a big friend group, he dates tons of girls, gets into all sort of wacky misadventures, but in the original show, he was none of that. In Miss Bliss, Zach Morris is kind of a loser. He's like a wannabe ladies' man. He's always having his plots foiled by his teacher. He's a child of divorce with an older brother. Lives in a quiet Indiana suburb. His 2 friends, Nikki and Mikey, didn't put up with his nonsense. He's a supporting character, basically. It's a show about a young teacher, and this is like her troublemaking student who always gets into antics but ends up losing at the end. Now, in Saved by the Bell, he is very different. He's the most popular guy in school, he goes out with a new girl every episode, he lives in California now, which is one of the bigger things is how did every single character move locations? His teacher and his two friends have vanished and been replaced by a cast of young attractive enablers. His parents are happily married and he's now an only child able to get all the attention he wants. He's had an entire flip in all aspects of his life. Okay, so as someone who watched the entire show, I fully believe this one. People forget, this was a really weird show with things that did not line up logically. The show has such confusing continuity and rules for how the world works that it all being imagined by some guy actually makes more sense than it just being what happened. Even in like a fictional setting, like what was up with that episode where they were all in a band and got extremely famous, and then by the next episode they were back to the status quo? There's something I really want to push forward for, something that's always confused me about the show that I never see mentioned in any discussions about this theory. So for the final season, 2 of the lead actresses stepped down from the show and they were replaced by one new character, Tori. She would be a will they, won't they love interest for Zach throughout the final season. But then in the graduation day finale episode, the 2 lead actresses came back and Tori vanished and nobody mentioned it. And then there were some spin-offs, but anyways. The high school setting being nothing more than an elaborate power fantasy dream that the main character is having explains over the weird cast turnover better than anything I've heard anyone suggest about it. Like, it's never acknowledged in universe. Like, I know, like, Chuck Cunningham syndrome is a thing, I'm really obsessed with it, but, like, she was the main character for an entire year, and then in the very last episode, they acted like she never existed. There's also little things that don't make sense for the world that the show establishes, like, Zach is a slacker who has other people do his homework for him and stuff, but he manages to get a perfect grade on his SATs, which is, mind you, technically, like, impossible to do. Also his like time freezing thing, which he uses to talk to the audience, which is acknowledged to not be like a cute little narrative device, but actually like a superpower he has because he can move people around within that state. And I've never watched the 2020 revival series, but from what I've read, he is the well-respected governor of California who married his high school sweetheart, which if that's not a power fantasy, I don't know what is.
Homer drops his donut dough.
The Simpsons is the longest running animated show in history, and it's seen better days. This isn't like a secret or a diss or anything, everyone knows the show probably should have ended a long time ago, but it's just too profitable now, and we need at least 780 more episodes before we can let the poor voice cast retire. Now, along with another long-running animated show with a floating timeline, the theory comes from all the characters not aging, except for Mo, who's the only character that aged. So obviously, someone is in a coma. The show started out a lot more grounded and realistic, before incorporating more outlandish and bizarre plots as the writers ran out of ideas, like Bart becoming a gamer. The theory proposes that Homer is actually in a coma, and the continued stories are what he has imagined in his head. More outlandish stories are a result of this. His family continues to tell him stories from the outside, his mind adding such modern celebrities and technology into his imagination. So, when did this happen? Well, we have an exact moment. Homer went into a coma after eating a poisonous fugu fish in Season 2, Episode 11, One Fish, Two Fish, Blowfish, Bluefish. Or alternatively, Jumping Springfield Gorge in Episode 8, Bart the Daredevil. Or alternatively, okay, so the fanbase can't actually decide on a specific divergence point in which this all could have started. The episode The Principal and the Pauper is agreed upon to be the point in which the show went downhill, but it's harder to point towards an area in which Homer could have done something so dangerous he could be placed into a coma for the next 30 years. Except there is. In Season 4, Episode 3, Homer the Heretic, Homer has a conversation with God who claims Homer will die in 6 months. 6 months later in real life, Season 4, Episode 18, So It's Come to This, a Simpsons clip show, Bart plays a prank that puts Homer into a coma. Homer wakes up at the end of the clip show, and then the show carries on. But let's say, he never woke up, and then the family had to keep recounting episodes to him forever. Until they were recounting, they were just counting episodes we never seen. They were telling the new episodes, and now they're inside his head. And okay, so this theory is really wonky because the fanbase can't decide when Homer actually goes into a coma. But the most interesting thing to add is that the show actually acknowledged it in a recent episode. In Season 34, Episode 3, Jesus, man, let them retire. Lisa the Boy Scout features many so-called deleted scenes portraying plot twists for the show, all of which aren't real but are funny to imagine. I personally like Martin being a grown man with a family who's been undercover for years as a child. This includes Homer waking up from a coma and revealing the Daredevil episode sent him into a coma and everything after that never happened. So in like some weird parallel universe, Simpsons multiverse. But as for the one we know, it has been acknowledged to be an alternate storyline and not true, which I think is definitive proof and not just the writer saying nah, so I'm gonna say this one is not true.
Me, heaven has to be like a cross between a like video and chicken and winning.
This one is one of my all-time favorite sitcoms, so I feel able to talk about it in detail. The backstory of the show is delivered in the theme song, which is what the theory mostly draws from. Will Smith lived on the west side of Philadelphia. One day, he accidentally ended up angering some local thugs and got into a fight. This leads his mom to send him to live with his auntie and uncle in Bel Air, California. Okay, listen, I wanted to play the theme song, but I would have gotten copyrighted, so just go with me explaining it as boringly as possible, okay? So the theory proposes that the fight was actually way worse than what we saw. It wasn't him being spun above somebody's head. He actually ended up dying from the injuries he sustained during the fight. And the cabbie who drove him from the airport in the rare cab is actually God or some sort of angelic figure, and the rest of the show takes place in heaven.
Oh my God, he's God!
So, that theory works if you only watch the theme song and nothing else of the show, because... Okay, yeah, I'm just gonna say this one doesn't work if you've watched even a few episodes. Like, I could literally just describe the plots to the most popular episodes of the show and the theory would completely go out the window. Although many could just be refuted with, you don't know how the afterlife works, so... yeah, that doesn't count. Anytime a character ends up in the hospital, when Uncle Phil has a heart attack, when Carlton nearly overdoses on speed, when Will gets shot by a mugger, like, imagine going to heaven and then having near-death experiences. Like, how does that even work? How exactly did an armed mugger get into heaven? Who is dealing drugs up in heaven? Secondly, anytime characters actually die. For two specific examples, Uncle Phil's dad dies off-screen and Judge Robertson dies on-screen. And they dedicate entire episodes to people dealing with this. Do I really need to explain that there are a lot of questions raised by the concept of somebody dying in heaven? Thirdly, Will's mom visits him from Bel Air in multiple episodes. Okay, if you wanted to say she died and joined him in heaven, sure, but he visits and then goes back home. Is she just having like near-death experiences every other week and then going up to see her son? Not to mention he has various friends who come to visit him from Bel Air. Like, I think the biggest example against Bel Air being heaven is the season 4 finale. So in the episode, Will goes back to Philly where he learns he has a reputation as a coward who ran across the country from a fight. This leads to him confronting the thug who beat him up originally, who has now turned his life around. Following this discovery, Will decides to stay in Philly with his mom. Then in the season 5 premiere, an NBC executive throws him in a van and drives him back to Bel Air. In real life, this was meant to be a potential finale to the show, but then the show got picked up for a 5th season, so they did a 4th wall break to explain it. I really beg someone to explain how that entire episode works into the theory.
Luigi, I just want to touch you.
In the debut title for the GameCube, Luigi takes center stage as he travels through a haunted mansion in order to save his brother. It's a very underrated game in my opinion. One fan theory suggests, what if Luigi never made it to the end? What if he gave up, surrendered, and became one with the ghosts in the mansion? In Luigi's mansion in the telephone room after the blackout occurs, while you're taking a call, lightning strikes and reveals Luigi's shadow hovering above the ground. This leads many to believe that Luigi hung himself, and the shadows portray the truth in the story. Yeah, so that's it. That's the only evidence for this theory. Okay, if this was an intentional addition in the game, then maybe, but it's quite literally just a bug. So in this cutscene, the camera is positioned at a low angle, and the lightning strike causes the shadow to be projected up onto the wall. So it's literally just a bug. They patched it in all future releases of the game. So yeah, without it, the theory has nothing to stand on, kind of like Luigi. Okay, so this one sucks, but I'm gonna explain it anyways because the image is so popular. Adventure Time is set in a fantasy world. Finn is the only human. What if he dreamt it and he was like in a coma and Jake was his real dog and stuff and he imagined he went on adventures in time? And that's it. That's the entire theory. There's nothing more to this. It's literally just this image. What if like the story ended with like Harry woke up back under the stairs? Wouldn't that be like so crazy? It sucks. Next one.
This is about Ash.
You want to do something for Ash? Then let him actually compete.
Pokemon anime ran for 23 years. Yeah, actually. And everybody and their mom have joked about how Ash never aged and he stayed 10 years old the entire time. And he just took like way too long to win the Pokemon League. You can guess the theory, so I'll just explain it. The first episode of Pokemon portrayed a slightly different introduction to the world than you'd expect, a slightly meaner world. Ash wakes up late on the day he's meant to pick his starter Pokemon. He rushes to be greeted by his rival Gary and a very grumpy and apathetic Professor Oak, a contrast to the friendly, helpful figure that he would later be portrayed as. But anyways, he ends up with a spare Pokemon because the other three were already picked, that being Pikachu, who is very different in his first appearance, being angry and non-cooperative. Ash would fumble through his first time away at home, being swarmed by Spearows, concluding with Pikachu needing to use a massive thunder attack in a river to get rid of the flock, catching Ash in the attack, and surprisingly, Ho-Oh flies overhead, about 2 years before they would actually be added to the game. Ash carries Pikachu away to a new town in the ending of the episode, but consider this. How did Ash come out of that attack pretty unscathed? What was the significance of him seeing a Pokemon who hadn't even debuted yet appearing in the episode? It's said in Pokemon lore that anyone who sees Ho-Oh is granted eternal happiness. The theory proposes that Ash was rendered comatose by the attack, and the encounter with Ho-Oh led to him dreaming of a much happier world for himself. One in which Pikachu grows into his best friend. Professor Oak becomes a friendly mentor. He reconciles with his rival, he makes a ton of companions, explores the world, and even eventually achieves his ultimate dream of becoming the league champion. Okay, so maybe it's just nostalgia for hearing this theory as a kid, but I buy into it. It helps that similar to the That 70s Show theory, it provides a actual divergence point in which this could have happened. Let's apply some extra evidence for it. Every time Ash enters a new region, his place in the world is completely reset. How does he rank so highly in the leagues of other regions only to arrive in a new one and absolutely nobody knows who he is? Not to mention, it's like Pikachu gets reset to level 1 every time they start a new region. Like, at the beginning of each new generation of the anime, Pikachu loses to a random starter Pokemon so he can show off how good they are. It's like all of his growth was completely reset. Also, the most obvious thing is that the show ran for 23 years and Ash remained 10 years old the entire time. No, he was never age lifted to 14, that was a rumor. Okay, so what? It's a lot of shows have floating timelines. This is easier to ignore in episodic shows where every episode is a self-contained story with occasional callbacks to continuity, but this is a serialized show which constantly makes references to gaps and progressions in time.
I can't believe it's been a whole year since we were here.
Like, he'll travel through 7 regions and we're meant to believe this only took place in the span of 1 year. The show ran for 1,269 episodes, by the way. So, like, yeah, I believe this one.
It was all a dream.
Now, that was a fun romp, but I think we should answer the question. Are all dream theories completely worthless and lazy? No. Are most of them, though? Yeah. The thing is, it's the easiest fan theory you can do. Like, I'll make one up right now. Breaking Bad, it's a dream that Hal from Malcolm in the Middle is having because they're both played by the same actor. Okay, wait, no, that one's actually real. That's a bad example. The thing is, good or bad, these theories get annoying because there are so many more inspired ones. But these ones get pumped out endlessly and talked about into oblivion, getting less and less nuance every time they're told, every time they're made. Like, dude, I've been guilty of this in the past, that's why I made this video. I'm guilty of it right now if we're being honest. With any other fan theory, it's fun to discuss the possibilities from a casual perspective, but with these types, there's no fun discussion because they are so easy to make, and anything you can explain with it can be just written off as, okay, well, it's a dream, they're in a coma, you can't explain that, try to explain that, it makes sense. The main takeaway from this is just, don't be annoying about it, basically. People create these to have fun. They're not all created equally. Some people are just trying to get an easy click off of a recognized property by adding a dark twist to it. But like, separate them in your head. Don't judge them all on the same level. Now, I hope you enjoyed the video, but
Hey.
Oh. Huh. All right, make sure to subscribe. We're going to be doing regular uploads during the summer. Um, Comment what's your favorite fan theory of this variety? Do you believe any of these? Do you um yeah, make sure to follow me on social media, do all of that and more. Peace out.